Hey again, everybody. It's JPierce here at _JPierce. I've got another tutorial walkthrough image for you today. I have this really cool looking nature scene, stream in the woods with this very neat looking tree with vines on it and roots. And I'm going to walk you through this. Hopefully this one won't be too long. I'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. I appreciate everybody's support on my tutorial videos so far. Please continue to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps keep me motivated to keep making these for you guys. So can't wait to see what kind of works you create from this walkthrough. So let's jump in. Let's not waste any more time. The first thing I'm going to do is create our tree. I'll link as much of the resources as I'm using in the description for this video. So we're going to start off with the forester tree, and the tree that I'm using for our main tree, if I scroll down, it's going to be this one called Olive, and it looks pretty cool right off the bat, but we're going to make a couple modifications to it. The first thing I'm going to do is set my viewport levels to 5 and the render levels to 5. And then we're going to extend the trunk up just a little bit, just about there somewhere, so it's not so squat. And then we'll go into the leaves, and we can see that the leaves here are kind of look a little sparse, so we're just going to fill that out. We're going to reduce this, keep every nth down to 0 or to 1, and you can see they're looking kind of too uniform, so we can fix that by changing some of these settings: the spread on branch, horizontal spread, spin local, spin leaf global, and swivel on branch. We'll bring that down, and there we go. And now it looks a little bit better. And then they're a little small, so we're going to bring them up to maybe 1.5 in leaf size. And that's pretty cool. Just wanted to fill out the leaves a little bit better. So if we look at our tree again, you know, it's just got some nice leaves up here, and they're mostly going to be cropped off the frame, but we want to have it filled in a bit. So let's go ahead now and texture our tree. So I have a leaf texture, and I have this trunk material that I made creating an image that I took of a tree that's outside my house. It's just some trunk texture, and there's a free piece of software called Materialize that I'll link in the description, and it allows you to take an image and create displacement maps and normal maps and roughness map from the image. It also does tiling and everything. But I think for this one, I just want to make sure that my border mode for all my images is set to mirror, just so I don't get any tiling issues. And so now I'm going to apply my trunk material. And you know, mostly the work of this image is working on this tree. So we're gonna definitely spend a good amount of time just working on the tree. So here we've got our tree trunk texture on here, and that looks pretty cool already, but let's start playing with the tiles. Some will go to 2 by 3. That's too much, so we'll go 1 by 2. And that's cool, and we'll go ahead and lift up the displacement some to maybe 8. And that looks pretty cool. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this texture and just get rid of the displacement. And then I'm going to call this branch, because I want to use the same material on all my branches, but I don't want to use the displacement because that's going to just kill the speed of the rendering. It's going to make the scene really heavy, and without the displacement in there, the material is going to look a bit brighter. So we're going to increase the gamma on this to darken down the branches of this material. And then we'll apply our leaf texture, and our leaf texture looks like this. It has a standard leaf material from the Forester library, and then I have 2 color corrections in here, and I'm going to make one of them slightly yellow, and using a mixed texture and a random color node, I'm going to plug that into the albedo specular in transmission with a IOR of 1.1. This is a universal style material in Octane. So with our leaf material applied, we can get rid of these default materials that came from the Forester plugin. And we're going to switch over to path tracing. And when we switch over to path tracing, I like to set my samples at 350 and a GI clamp of 4. And let's bring a daylight in so that we can get a better idea of what our textures and everything look like. And that's already a pretty nice looking tree. We've got some good texture on everything, and it looks pretty cool. So maybe we can use a bit more height on our displacement. Let's try 12. And there we go. That looks pretty nice. We get some detail in the bark. I don't know what kind of tree this is, but you know, it's something magical. Let's call it a magical tree. And so now what's cool is in our image, if we go back to our reference image, we've got these cool vines growing up it, and also these vines hanging down. So that's going to be our next step. And we're going to go ahead and set up our viewport better so that we get a better idea. I have my output settings to 1080 by 1350. And now I'll go ahead and show you this really cool technique for adding these vines down the side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on garage shading, but I'm going to turn off textures, and maybe we'll switch to hidden line too. Okay, now we can see kind of what's going on a little bit better. And for right now, I'm going to pause my Octane render. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to add these vines in. And this is a pretty fun, pretty sweet technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a circle. We're going to set this circle around 5. And then we're going to add a sweep NURB, a sweep object generator. We'll drop the circle inside. And then I'm going to grab the sketch tool. And in order to draw on, because what's going to happen is I'm going to draw on these splines, and it's going to make our vines. And in order to do that, I want to enable snapping and turn off vertex snapping and turn on polygon snapping. So we have snap enabled and polygon snap enabled, and we have vertex snap, which is enabled by default. We have that turned off. We do not want vertex snap, we want polygon snap. So now I'm going to start right here and just draw, and let's see, my snapping wasn't working. I have to, I guess because I turned it off. Turn on snap and polygon snap. So I'll start up here, and you can see it says forest or tree polygon snap, and that's good. That's exactly what we want. And so now our spline is drawn onto the surface of this. So now all I got to do is drag this in here, and it's drawing on. And what's so cool about this is once I start drawing more splines, it's actually drawing on top of what's already there. So you can see you get these really cool looking vines just by, it'll draw right on top of the existing spline. And we'll do one over here maybe. And so this is a really cool technique, and you can use this for all kinds of things. It's just the polygon snapping with the sketch tool. And as long as I have my spline selected, it's going to continue drawing on that spline. So I don't have to have 10 different sweeps going. So we're going to put, maybe we'll put one more right over here. And that's pretty cool. And you can see I went off the side here, so I'm going to undo. And we'll just check our work again. Okay, so we've got some cool looking you know, vines happening here. So let's go ahead and we're going to re-enable our scene, our Octane live viewer. And I have a material from Polygon that I'm going to use. It's called Polygon Moss. I believe this is one of their freebies. So I'll do another link for this material in the description. And in here, it's just got some basic PBR stuff. And we're just going to apply this moss to our sweetener. And let's take a look. And there we go. And it's basically done. So what we can do though is I'm going to switch this from a glossy material to a standard diffuse material, so that I now have the option of taking my image texture and piping it into the transmission channel. And so now we get some edge here. We get some really nice edge lighting on these edges. So there we go. We've got some cool vines just using a displaced moss texture. And what we can do too is add a color correction in here, because I feel like this is probably too yellow, and we'll tint it just a bit towards green, or it's too green, I want it to be more yellow. I'm trying to match these leaves here, so we'll tint it slightly towards yellow, and we'll pipe that to the transmission also. So we have these really cool looking vines here, and you can come in and do a close-up here with this nice tree texture, and you could do something really neat, just working the lighting and working these textures with these vines wrapping around this tree. There's so many options. I just love working in Cinema and Octane. You get so many options to do so many cool things. So there we go. So that's pretty neat. And now I'm going to show you another one of my favorite plugins to do these hanging vines here got these cool vines hanging down. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to take a sphere, and if you haven't seen this plugin before, I highly recommend it. I'll link this as well. It's called Topol, and all I have to do is take this sphere, drop it inside of this plugin called Topol, and what it's going to do is it's going to generate a bunch of splines. Let me reset my position there, and I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to break apart my sphere and just flatten it down some, and then scale it up. So I'm just going to create a little point cloud up here for this Topol plugin. So you can see it's generating all these lines, and it would be cool if I did a whole tutorial on this, but you can see it's just a big mess of lines. And so what you can do in here is, I want this, so I'll just show you this first. The transform curvature is set to 0, so once I start pulling this down, I've got instant vines, and that's pretty sweet, but there's way too many of them. So let's take this down to maybe just 20, and we'll reposition, and there we go, we got instant vines. And in order for this to show properly, I think I still need to use this thickness setting under the generate tab, and I'll set my radius to just maybe 1, maybe even that's too big, just maybe 0.5. And then we're going to reuse the same polygon moss, and you can see the tiling is not right. So I found that in the V tiles, this is going to depend on how many lines you have, but in the V tiles it needs to be almost like 100, and that's pretty cool looking. So we've got these cool looking vines, and if you get super close, they're not going to necessarily hold up, but for our purposes in this render, that's going to work just fine. It's going to look really nice. And that's all I did for this tree. So we have these cool vines, we have vines hanging down, vines growing on the tree. And so now I'm just going to group all these together and call it tree. Happy tree. And so because we're using displacements on these textures, I'm just going to go ahead and just disable them for now, so that we can have a bit more speed. And for now, I'm also going to bring this down to 3 for the viewport levels while I walk you through the rest of the scene. And then we just have to remember to set those things back before we render, before we set up our final scene. So now I just want to show you how I did the roots. What I did was I just grabbed a sphere and set it down here, and we're going to break it apart and flatten it out some. We're just using this as a surface to draw on, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my sweep, and we'll turn this one back on, and we'll use our branch texture for this so that we're not displacing and having a really hard time. And we'll delete this spline, and we'll get the sketch tool again, and we'll make sure our snap settings are correct. Enable snap, polygon snap, and we'll go in and just start drawing. And we'll set this inside, and we'll start drawing and drawing and drawing. And again, you can go you can go over top, and it's going to create cool little bumps. So you can get very creative with this, because you can even start up on the tree and it'll still draw inside. And the more you work at this and the more detailed you want to get, you can get some pretty cool looks. But I'm just going to run through this very quickly so that we have some rough looking roots here, because we're not going to leave this sphere here. We're going to hide the sphere now, and we're probably just going to delete it. And I didn't even go all the way around the tree, and that's fine. So we're only going to see it from this side. And what's going to help out with our roots is if we set under the sweep object, under the object tab, if you twirl down this details, there's going to be a scale setting. And so if you adjust the scale setting some, you'll get more realistic looking roots. And if I tweak this at the top to round these out, you get some cool looking roots. And so that's a really fun way to do roots, just by hand drawing them using the sketch tool and the polygon snap trick. So there we go. Let's fill it out just a bit more, just over here in case. Now see, I didn't have my spline selected, so undo, make sure my spline is selected, and now I can draw. Because if in case we decide we want to turn this tree, I just want to have good coverage and make sure we're nicely filled out. And this is pretty cool because you can get very artistic with these roots. So that's pretty awesome. So let's hide our sphere again, and we're basically done with our tree now. And I'm gonna hide it. And the rest of this is gonna be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to set up a plane. I like to work it at 4,000 by 4,000, 200 by 200. And looking at our image again, we just have this curved little creek here and a raised up area where our tree is going to sit on top of. So I'm going to break apart my plane, and let's see, I like to work from this angle this way. And let's start with lifting up an area. Let's go back to Gerard. Lifting up this area for our tree. And let's use a wax tool to holding down control to push down for our water. And let's go back to pull, increasing the size using middle mouse button to increase the size and change the pressure. And we'll lift up some of these areas over here. This is pretty rough, but it'll be fine and will look okay once we get everything all textured and layered in. So here we go. This is about the area where we want to be with our water, and raised up area here, our water running through, and that looks pretty cool. Well, it looks like pretty much nothing right now, but it'll all come together. And I'm going to use a flatten tool to sort of make this look less rounded, just sort of give it some more definition. And let's make our creek a bit deeper. So there we go. So that's the front of our plane there. Okay, and now we're going to texture this up. We're going to use RD textures again. I'll do another link for them. The materials I want to use in this render is going to be soil number 14, and rock ground number 7. And we'll go ahead and start with the rock. And we'll set these tiles to maybe 3 by 3. And we'll increase our displacement here. This is not the right material. We'll increase this displacement maybe up to 90. We can go more, 120. Cool. And we'll call this one rocks. And we'll call this one soil. And we'll bring our soil in here. And this one probably needs more tiles. We'll go to 7 by 7. And we'll start blending these together with a pull brush. So one thing that I'm seeing right here is that this material is not set up properly. So our rocks have followed geometric normal set. I'll just show you what's happening here. Sometimes this happens. You can see it's ripping the apart the surface. So if we just set this to follow smooth normal instead of geometric normal, fixed. So in case you guys have that problem, that's what you can do. So here we go. We're going to mix these together with our sculpting brushes again. Let's push down the rocks here, and let's use a smooth brush to get some sedimentation in our soil here. And let's leave the rocks inside the creek. I could go through and sculpt on this for a while longer, but you know, let's try and get through this thing. So I'm going to use a disc for our water layer, and we'll bring in a water material. And this water material is pretty simple. Just using Octane noise with these settings, and transform value, and a scattering medium with these settings, and we'll apply it. And we've got a pretty nice looking creek, and it's probably a little too high up. Maybe we want it somewhere around here. And now you can see that I'm having some difficulty getting it where I want, which is a reminder that I forgot to turn off snapping. So we want snapping off so that we can get this exactly where we want it to be. And let's use a flatten brush and try and blend in these edges some more. Maybe we want a wax brush. So we're just lifting up our soil layer here, and we're going to lift up some rocks because we want to have a couple rocks poking through our surface of our water. That's too much. Yeah, maybe one right there. Maybe some others right back here. And I love the sculpting brushes because I feel like I'm painting, you know, like I'm being Bob Ross in here. Just painting little rocks into my creek. And we want some right here too. And with the scattering medium, it looks really neat because we get, you know, different looking depths to our water. So just working in little bits of rock into our creek bed here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab some plants. I have a preset plant set up. If you watch my tutorial before, I talk about how to set up these plants with a plane effector and a random effector. So I'm not going to walk through all of that here today. I'm just going to set up a grass here with our leaf material. And let's set our scatter on our soil and set it to surface and start scattering some plants in. We'll go up to 6,000 and let's try let's see, what do we look like we have over here. Looks like I used two. Probably this one, this tufted grass, which is a bit large. And then another one I really love is called this leaf grass. And that one's a bit small. So that's pretty cool right there. And we'll take our plane and just bring it down just a hair to fill in all of these areas. So now we have a cool looking creek with forest floor here, and as we're getting closer to what our final composition will look like, I like to go into press Shift V into the viewport options and set this to 80 so that we get black bars and we can see where our edge is here because we're right up to the edge of this plane. So yeah, we want to be just in here somewhere. And now I can duplicate my scatter and delete these plants, and we're going to bring the count down to around 30 and bring in a tree. And for this render I used another tree I love called this mangrove here, and we'll bring it into our scatter. And we don't want this normal align. we don't want them to be angled. So when we have it here, it's going to orient itself to the normals of the surface. And if we set it down, it's going to be straight up and down. And right away I can see that this is not exactly where I want these trees to be, so we can play with the seed. And maybe something there will be okay. I'm going to make some modifications to this mangrove tree. We're going to start with bringing up our viewport levels so we can see what this thing looks like. And let's go ahead and texture this too. We'll put our leaf material on here. And then for our branch and trunk, we're going to use our non-displaced branch material from our original tree. So what we're going to do to this is take the trunk height, because this is what a tree would look like really if it was growing out in a field somewhere. But when you're in a forest, you'll see that trees don't really grow like this inside a forest. They grow a lot taller and a lot thinner. And that is going to really help with lighting. So I'll take the trunk height and we're going to bring it up quite a bit. And then we'll start extending out our branches, making each of these branch levels longer by increasing the branch length. Maybe I went too far on level 1. So in a forest, a tree is going to grow a lot more like this, thinner and farther out, because it's clustered in with a bunch of other trees and they're all fighting for light. So a lot of times you see nature renders and it's just way too dense. It's way too densely packed. So that's cool. That looks cool. We're going to duplicate our tree and get a different tree. My old standby Aralia. And I use this tree to fill out some of the undergrowth. And the modifications we'll make to this, change the viewport levels, and we're going to make it quite a bit smaller. But we're also going to increase the branch length up quite a bit. And there we go. And we don't have enough now, so we'll go up to 75. And we're starting to get a nice looking woods scene beginning to happen. And the more I play around with the seed, I start to see where exactly I want my camera to live. And each one of these is going to be unique, which is fun. So there we go. I think that's kind of a cool composition right there. And the last thing we'll do is get a background started over here so that we're not looking off into space. So I just use a landscape for this. And we'll position it over here, and we're just going to extend it out. And we'll use our soil texture on it. And bring up the tiles, maybe 15. That's fine. And we'll duplicate our scatter. And this scatter does not need the plane effector, so we'll get rid of it. And we'll apply our landscape to that scatter, and we'll bring this up quite a bit. And now we have some wooded background. And let's bring our tree back. And we want it to be here on top of our little hill that we made. And now, using the object mode instead of model mode, we're going to scale it up. Probably to right there. And lift it up, and it's turned the wrong way, so we'll turn it. And you can see all our cool roots that we drew are hanging out right there. And in terms of our trees here, we've got kind of some issues. So what you can do is duplicate the plane effector, and you can change this fall off to a sphere. And then we want to make sure that it's properly applied. And we'll take this sphere and bring it into where our tree is. And we'll set this to, let's try 200 by 200 by 200. And it needs to be a bit bigger. And what this will do is it's going to eliminate any of our clones that are sitting right around the base of the tree. So there we go, I've cleared out that area a bit. You can see there was a tree here that was kind of obscuring the profile of our tree. So let's go back to 5 so we can see our leaves up above. And it's looking pretty great, you guys. So I'm just going to work on the lighting a little bit more. Well, what I'll do first is add a fog volume and set this to 900, and we'll use 6,000 by 6,000 by 6,000. And then we'll set this to full white on the absorption and full white on the scattering. Bring up the volume step length to about 20 and increase the scattering phase and reduce the density. So now I've got some fog, and we'll set it back away from the camera some. And now I'm going to work on the lighting. So our sun is coming in from here, but in our image it's right behind these trees. So we'll start pivoting the sunlight around and tilting it down some. And we're getting actually kind of a completely different look because my trees are not very tall. So to fix that, I can just increase the size of these trees. We'll go bring it up to 2. And now we're looking a bit more like we're inside of a forest, and we have too much density, too much scattering. And you know, you guys, when I make these, you know, I keep myself pretty open to the randomness of what may happen. And so, yeah, so that's very cool looking, and it's a bit different from the source image. It's a bit different, but you know what? I think it looks really cool. So that's my hope for you, is that you will take these techniques and experiment and maybe come up with something that is not exactly what the tutorial image had, but it looks like this is too dense back here. So yeah, super cool looking. We have our tree and we're just about done, so let's turn on our vines again. And you can see it's really cool the way the light hits these vines. And maybe we'll tweak the lighting a bit more. Maybe if we came from this side, we'd get something interesting too. So the lighting from this side is definitely an interesting look too. But I'll leave it over here for now. Sort of coming in like it's just about mid-morning. And it's nice to get these shafts of light to hit on these roots, so we get some cool definition in here. And now the more I move this light to be from above, the more these shafts of light are going to come down and hit the river, hit our water. So I would probably work on this lighting for a bit while longer, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to add a fill light, and we're going to slide it over and bring it up some, and we'll probably change the temperature. And so the final stages here is really just adjusting the lighting and trying to get you know, this to be exactly where I want it to be, and get something really cool looking to happen. You know, like I said, the light from over here could be very interesting. The light from over here could also be very interesting. You get something totally different, but also really cool. I think I kind of really like that. We get a nice definition of our tree. And yeah, you can just play with this, and you know, I hope that you guys can use these techniques to make some really cool nature renders. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. Please remember to like and subscribe my videos, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with these techniques. If you have any suggestions or comments, please leave them, and thank you all again so much.